Project Cars 2. This is the follow-up game from the first Project Cars game that came out in spring of 2015. The game was met with pretty decent reviews, with some outlets saying that the game was good and others saying otherwise. However, the game did have some potential. The track list was very good, the graphics were quite pretty, and the car list was arguably somewhat decent as well. So here we are, 2 years down the line, and today Project Cars 2 is being released. And so far, everything has been looking pretty good. The trailers for the game have all looked promising, even though some of them have come across a bit lacklustre and dull, but there's been trailers for the fact that Ferrari are now in the game, they've shown off the new McLaren at Long Beach, as well as revealing a car roster that has been heavily improved from the first one, and by God, the track list is just in another league. But, as anyone with a slight modicum of knowledge knows about video games, if something is too good to be true, then it probably is. Or in this case, the first one was pretty bad, so are all these good things gonna be true? And is it going to be better than the first one? I can say straight away, this is 100% better than the first game. I would be very surprised if this game was worse than the first one. So, let's get into the video debunking what's good and what's bad about Project Cars 2. Now, the first good thing I believe that this game has going for itself is the track list. I also think it's probably one of, if not my favourite track list of any racing game ever. There is so much variation, from snow and ice to coastal roads in Europe. Also, being slightly biased here, but I do love the sheer amount of small British tracks this game has as well, like Donington, Cadwell and Snetterton. Furthermore, another thing that I think this game has got nailed down to a T is the car list. Whilst it may not be a huge variety, they have got a pretty good selection of race cars, road cars and old classic F1 cars. So moving on from the cars and the track lists, how do these all combine together? Well, I'd argue that it's a pretty good sim racer, with decent AI as well. You feel that when you're in a race, sometimes the AI could be too easy or could be too hard, but once you tweak about with the settings enough, you can really get a comfortable AI setting that makes for rather tense racing moments. That's something I quite like about this, is the difficulty slider. There is no easy, medium or hard. You can fine-tune and pinpoint precisely what kind of difficulty you really want to play about with. Next up on my list of good things is the graphics. Whilst the first one wasn't exactly an ugly game, this one is by far much prettier. I feel the colours are much more vibrant in this one. I feel like everything stands out a little bit more and is slightly more crisp. The first game did look pretty, and to be honest, the graphics in this one are marginally better, but that's not a bad thing. The graphics have always been good in this racing franchise. More so, the sound design matches the graphics hand in hand. It is very well done. It is very crisp and poignant of how many things make many sounds, such as the brakes squeaking. You can hear the rattling of the seatbelt in the passenger seats. You can hear the pedals pushing down onto the floor. Everything sounds very crisp, and once again, those with the graphics and the car list and the tracks immerses you in even more so. Briefly talking about the first Project Cars, something that did absolutely amazingly and blew most racing games out of the water with the weather dynamics that the game came with, and I'm glad to say they've carried them over and improved them in the second one. They've now added snow and blizzards, which I don't believe were in the first one. They've also continued the features of, you know, the rain can evolve into a thunderstorm, that can evolve into fog, and so on and so forth. You've got the mixtures of weather which you can choose when it will progress. The dynamic weather system is back, and I'm glad about that. Now finally on the list, I have controller customization. However, I also believe this can also be a bad part of the game. The controller customization is vast and you can remap buttons. However, I will talk as to why it's bad in the next part of this somewhat of a review. So that's what I believe is good about the game, but now we're going to move on to what I believe is bad about the game, and thankfully this list is a lot shorter than I thought it was going to be. Now, first and foremost on this bad list is something that a lot of people have been a little bit cautious about when going into Project Cars 2, and that's the handling. In the first game, some cars were drivable with a controller, others weren't. In fact, if you wanted to drive them, you'd need a wheel, and that was a big issue, and that's why people are approaching Project Cars 2 with such caution, is because they don't really know whether or not they're going to be able to drive these cars with a controller. Now, the people over at Slightly Mad Studios who make this game did say that's something that they were going to focus on, and they said that we're going to make sure that cars will be usable with a controller. Oh, for God's sakes. Unfortunately, in my case, a handful of cars, specifically I think the road cars, are really not drivable. They're just a bit of a sloppy mess. When I say that, I mean when you exit out of a corner, you want to correct yourself, but because the handling's so slow, you twitch and then you end up spinning around and you're going backwards around the track. So you think, okay, just increase the reaction times, just increase the speed that it takes to flick the little controller about. You do that, you spin around, and there's no way of possibly holding a slide because you've got to fine-tune the angle of the wheel, and that means you have to change the dead zone, which means you have to change the sensitivity to get to that part. It's just a bit of a mess. Now, whilst more cars in this game handle nicer than the first one, it's still a big issue, and I do warn those who want to play this game to play with the road cars only, be cautious, because a handful of them can drive quite nicely. However, a large majority of them also handle like boats. Now, moving on from the cars handling like boats, another thing that I think is a little bit disappointing is the campaign. Whilst I didn't expect anything to be groundbreaking from it, it is somewhat a bit dull. It's better than the first one, but to be honest, I like when you can progress and unlock things. However, with this, you can literally choose which one you want to go in, and then that's that. You can work your way up, so that could be arguably a progression system. But my issue with it is there needs to be a little bit more going on. I don't know what, I can't put my finger on it, but it's just a little bit, it needs that bit more. Now, finally on the list is the controller customization, which I did put on the good. Now, remember me saying that the development team for this game insisted this game will be usable on a controller. Well, it can be, but there are so many options that all these buttons just do not fit onto a controller. You have to use a keyboard, or you have to use a steering wheel for them. There is no physical way all of these DRS-enabled, ABS, traction control buttons that you can configure with the controller, your controller would have to be 3 times the size of your average Xbox One controller. It's just not enough buttons. It gets rather frustrating and confusing very quickly. So, overall, the game can be fun. I still think you need a wheel to play it, however, this has definitely been improved from the first one. And what I love about this game, more than anything, what I love about racing games as a whole, there are these few moments where everything just lines up and it feels right. Everything fits nicely. When you're battling out some AI around a few hairpins, making sure you get the best possible line out of the corner, hammering it down on the straight, making sure to pass all of the AIs with as smug as face as possible. It's those tense moments that just feel right and just make you want to play games like this, and that's what makes this game worthwhile. Right up until the point where you decide you want to change from a racing car into a road car, and before you know it, you've spun out and you're unable to race the damn thing because you're racing with a controller and you realise you need a wheel to drive the bloody thing. But nonetheless, I would still recommend this game to those who are brave enough to play it with a controller. But anyway, that's enough of me rambling on for today. I hope you guys have enjoyed this video. This is a bit different for me doing this kind of first impression / review kind of thing. So if you want to see more stuff like this, please do let me know down below in the comments. And yeah, thanks for watching the video, guys, and until the next one, adios.